Hello and welcome back to this series. In this video, we are going to be working with the Boolean data types and their operations. So what are Boolean data types? Well, we have made mention of the Boolean data type a couple of times in this tutorial, and in this video, we are going to focus on them particularly. Now, we already stated that the Boolean data types are the data type that relates to a particular information, and it is only going to return a true or a false statement on that information. So it will just check whether a data is associated with a particular thing or is of a particular value. So if that data is associated to a particular thing or is of a particular value, it will just return a true statement. It will just return true. Okay. And if it is not associated to a particular value, it will return a false statement. So the Boolean data type, unlike the other data types that has several value or dynamic value, it has just a true or a false value. So it is either something is true or it's false. So now, for instance, am I a female? Yes. So if I'm to check whether I am a female, can either be true or false. There can never be an in-between statement, right? So I can either be a male or a female. So that is the basic explanation of a Boolean data type. Now I'm going to create two variables. Bool1 equals true and bool2 equals false. So when you want to write your Boolean data type, you write true or false with in a capitalized form. So you write true or false in a capitalized form, right? So that is how to declare a Boolean data type. Okay. So now, what operation can we perform on the Boolean data type? Most of the time, you cannot just create a variable and set it to true or false. You understand? So most of the time, what we do is to check for a particular instance or to check for a particular action or to check for a particular fact concerning a data, and then if that fact that we are checking is true, we return the Boolean data. So we return the true or a false statement for that particular variable. And if it is false, we now return the false statement for that particular variable or object. So that is where the operations of the data type now come in, right? So for instance, I have two numbers. Let's say I have two numbers, 10 and 20. So, and what I want to do in this particular program is that I want to check which of the numbers are higher. So Python detects that, okay, this particular number is higher than the other one. And let's say that this number is representing the number of students that went for inter-house sports competition in a school, right? Or that participated in an inter-house sports competition in a school. So right now, just imagine that you you have a website, and your school has a website, and you ask your teachers to fill in the amount of data, the amount of students that participated for that competition. So at the time that you are creating that website, you do not know which of them is going to be more, like this class that is going to have more participants. So if you and you have all the classes there, right? So what you are going to do is that you are going to use the Boolean operators to check by the time they submit all the numbers or all the names of the students that participated in that inter-house sports competition. By the time they submit their list, you can now compare the classes, and then you will now be able to pinpoint that, okay, this is the, or let's say you just have two classes, right? So you now say, okay, for this class and this class, which one had more participants? So you now write a program that says that if class A is higher than class B, then award them a gift. And if class B is higher than class A, award them a gift, right? So now, first of all, a lot of things are going to happen. So Python is first of all going to get the numbers that were submitted to Python, and then Python is now going to compare the numbers that were submitted for the two classes. So let's say that this 10 and this 20 are representing those two numbers, and Python will now compare 10 and 20 and ask for, okay, which one is greater. So let's say I set this, I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to set it to 20, and I'm going to set this one to 10. So let's say that at this point, we don't know the value of bool1 at all. So bool1, and it would have been better if I wrote it class 1. So the number for class 1 is bool1, and the number for class 2 is boolean2. So now, and what we can do is, if we can check the number that is greater, so we are going to ask Python between bool1 and bool2, which one is greater? Or you can ask, is bool1 greater than bool2? And Python will say true. And you now ask again, is bool2 greater than bool1? Python will now say false, right? So that is just a plain example of uh, how these data types work. So most of the time, uh, you don't just assign a true or a false value to, most of the time, right? You don't just assign a true or a false value to a particular statement or to a particular variable or object, unless you use something like a conditioner to check that data and know whether it meets that requirement or the fact is true of that data. So I'm going to change these two variables from bool1 to class 1, and I'm going to change this to class 2. I'm going to clear this. So how can we check the numbers that are assigned to these two, which one is greater? Now, we have already, when we were doing Python basic operations, we have already talked about logical and comparison operators. So for comparison operators, I'm going to write my comment. We have equals equals, greater than, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, right? And then we have not equals. So now these are the comparison operators. So if we want to compare these two values now, we now use these comparison operators to work on it. Now, it is important to note that at this point, we are not working with Boolean data types. We are still trying to compare two data to know which one is greater or lesser, or whether they are equal or they are not equal. So if you perform the comparison, then Python will not give you back a Boolean data type, which is true or false, right? So now, how are we going to compare that? So if I want to check whether the two of them are equal, so I'll just, so that we can see the effect on the screen, I'm going to add a print statement. So I will add class 1 is equals class 2. So, and I'll close this and I'll run. So this time around, it says false. So this data type that is returned for us is false. Now I'm going to change the comparison operator to less than. So now it's going to compare whether class 1 is less than class 2. So it says false. So now I'm going to add greater than. So is class 1 greater than class 2? And now we have true. And we invariably we know we know all the results that are going to come out of this, right? But another thing we are going to look at is now logical operators. So logical operators include and, or, and not. So by this time, we are not just comparing the two, we are asking for Python to take a step forward. So check whether the two are the same, right? And also this other two, check this other condition too, right? So now what we can do here is that we can come here and write and say and class 2. So here we are asking whether class 2 is greater than class 1 is greater than class 2. So and class 2 is less than. So we can't say greater than again. So because that's logically impossible. But I'm going to say less than. So and I'm going to add class 1. So and I'm going to save this and run. So you know that these two conditions are true. Now class 1 is greater than class 2 and class 2 is less than class 1. So if we say we are using or, well, if one of the conditions are true, it will return true, and even if one of the conditions are false. So I am going to change this greater than less than to greater than. So now we have class 1 is greater than class 2, that is true. Class 2 is greater than class 1, that is false. But since one of these two conditions are true, the Python is going to return, well, one of them are true. So yeah, because you use the or operator. So I'm going to run this, and this time again it says true. So now how do we use not? So how we use not is that we can just pass the not statement here, and we enclose this in a parenthesis. So we are asking, is not class 1 greater than class 2? And let's save and run. And it says false because class 1 is greater than class 2. So and we changed it and now it says true. So it does the inverse of what it is actually, what the greater than is meant, or the less than sign is meant to do, right? So another way of doing this inverse is we can check for equality, are they the same? And of course Python is going to tell us no, they are not the same. So now if I run this now, Python says no, they're not equal. But if I pass this exclamation sign with this equal, I'm simply saying, are they not equal? Python is going to say true, they are not equal. So we have the true value there. So now we have revised the logical and the comparison operators. So now the next thing that we are going to do, we are going to be working with conditional statements. So what are conditional statements? Well, conditional statements simply implies you want to check for a condition by using some keywords, and when you check for that condition, you now go to the next line and write a Python statement that is going to be executed if that condition is met. So how are we going to actualize this? How we are going to do it is that we are going to write a keyword if. Now this if is like a condition even in normal English language. So if you want to make a decision, you are going to say, okay, this decision is dependent on if this condition is met or if this situation is obtainable, right? So we are going to write this keyword if, and now instead of just printing all of this, we can say I'm going to comment this out, yeah, and I'm going to add that statement there. So if class 1 is greater than class 2. So you write the semicolon. So if class 1 is greater than class 2, what do you want us to do then? Python is not like, okay, I'm listening. If class 1 is greater than class 2, what do you want us to do? So what you want Python to do is that if class 1 is greater than class 2, please divide class 1 by class 2. So what I'm going to do is class 1 over class 2. So I can just say print it out, divide it and print it out. So print class 1 over class 2. So we already know what this forward slash will do for us. Then I will say else. So I'll come here and say else, and I'll write semicolon again. I will now hit enter, print class 2 over class 1. So I'm going to explain this, right? So you're checking which number is bigger so that you divide one with the other, right? So if class 1 is greater than class 2, then print this. But if class 1 is not greater than class 2, it means that class 2 is greater than class 1. So by normal judgment, if one condition is not met, then the true statement will now go to the other condition, right? So at this point, class 1 is greater than class 2. So let's run this code, and Python now prints the division of class 1 by class 2 for us. So this time around, I'm going to change the values, and this time class 1 becomes 5 and class 2 becomes 10. So I want class 1 to be lesser, and this time around, again we have 2. So I'm going to change it to something that will give us a different number so that we know that something is happening. So 2 is now divided 10, so now we have 5. Okay, so I hope you understand this very well. So this is how it is obtainable, in even if it is a string. What you have to note is that you write your if, and then you write the condition that you're trying to check, and after you write that condition, you write the code that you want to be executed if that condition is met. Then if there is an alternative condition, you now write in the else block that if the first condition is not met, please execute the alternative code. And that is when you are sure that if condition A was not met, then the obvious condition that is met is condition B. So this happens when you are checking for only 2 conditions. Now, there are cases where you may have to check for 3 conditions or 4 conditions or more, but we are going to be doing that properly by the time we get to control structure. So thank you so much for being with me on this data type series, and see you in our next series.